Hey gang, welcome back to another video. So this week I'm finally tackling a project I've been putting off for some time. And it turns out that I'm not the only one who is procrastinating. My buddy Brian over at the Smuggler's Room and I have both decided to customize our Home Depot Holiday Stormtroopers. So when you're done watching this video, be sure to head over to his channel and check out his build, because I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Okay, enough stalling. Let's get on to the build. For the uninitiated, this is the Home Depot Holiday Stormtrooper animatronic. It's roughly 6 feet tall and has most of the major hallmarks of the Stormtrooper armor. And its helmet moves and it plays holiday soundbites via motion activation. Now on its own, it's a great budget-friendly display, but I think it could be better with a few easy modifications. The inspiration for my Stormtrooper comes from Emmy Award-winning Lucasfilm character designer Brian Matyas. Back in 2020, he shared this concept art from The Mandalorian Season 1, and I was immediately drawn to it. So when the Stormtrooper animatronics arrived in stores, I knew it was my chance to bring my version of his design to reality. But the first thing that I would need to tackle is the helmet. It's far too clean for this decommissioned Stormtrooper, so I grabbed a can of hairspray and gave the entire helmet a coating. And after a bit of help from my hairdryer, I can lay down some burnt umber paint using my airbrush. The hairspray creates a barrier between the plastic of the helmet and the brown paint so that once the paint is dry, I can use a damp sponge or rag to reactivate the paint. This will allow me to create some organic grime and overall discoloration to the helmet. So I aimed my paint for all of the edges and recesses, and once it felt like I had everything looking good and dirty, I grabbed a sea sponge and started to remove paint. This process works really well for objects with lots of inset details, since the sponge can't reach into those areas and it naturally creates some gradation of the paint as you work it across the surface. Its one drawback is that the sponge holds onto the paint and will need to be rinsed out regularly to keep you from just moving paint around from one area to another. And after a few minutes, it was looking just like I'd hoped, as if it had been found on the side of a road somewhere and was being repurposed by another soldier. Once the paint was dry, I gave the helmet a quick coat of satin clear coat to lock in my paint, and then I could set it to dry for a bit. When the clear coat was dry, I grabbed my trusty silver Sharpie and began to give the helmet a bit more character by adding in some small scratches to the black brow bar. This is a pretty quick and easy way to give it that chip down to the metal look. Now I went pretty light on this and may add more down the road, but for now I think this is good and I can move on to the next part of the build. Since I already had the helmet removed from the body, I figured I'd get to my first tech mod of this build by adding a battery-powered, motion-activated MP3 player and speaker to the underside of the helmet. This player can be loaded with your own audio files via USB or micro SD card, and when the PIR sensor is triggered, it will play the sound bites. I decided to use a bit of Velcro to hold the battery pack in place just behind the rod that connects to the internal servos. This is done to help balance out the helmet and hopefully keep from overloading the motors inside of the head. For the speaker, I went a bit more permanent and hot glued it at the jaw, since I won't likely need to remove it. The circuit board was glued into the small gap in the side so that I would still have access to the USB port and SD card readers if necessary. And lastly, because the back of the sensor isn't flat, I glued together a few pieces of craft foam and then glued the foam to the underside of the motion sensor and added in some Velcro to hold it in position, just in case I needed to move it to a different spot that would allow it to work better. With that out of the way, and through the magic of editing, I could get to weathering the rest of the armor, starting with the arms. And now to the rest of the body, most of which won't be seen, but I figured it made more sense just to do it should I decide in the future to display it without the rest of the gear. Speaking of gear, I tracked down a surplus German Army rain poncho online, which will get me about 90% of the way there as far as costuming goes, but I'm also going to need some accessories. I had this bandolier in a belt, but it needed some greeblification, as Brian would say, to bring it into the Star Wars universe. So I scuffed up the plastic and applied a universal greebly to the buckle with a bit of CA glue. And once it was locked in position, I could grab some spray primer, coat the entire buckle, and set it to dry while I shifted my attention to the fabric portion of the bandolier. For a majority of this weathering, I'll be using raw umber acrylic ink, so once I loaded up the airbrush, I got down to spraying. While I'm weathering props, I'm always thinking about how the item would be used in the real world. This helps me determine where I should add or subtract color and to what degree. In the case of the bandolier, I'm thinking about how they'd be used and where they may have staining from the oils in our fingertips. This step got repeated for a belt, and then I let them both dry while I got back to the belt buckle. With the primer completely dry, I'll lay down a base coat of aluminum spray paint, and once that was dry, I could lightly dust the surface with some flat black to dull down the shine. I don't need full coverage here, just enough to make it look a little grimy. I'll also grab the airbrush and give them a touch of the raw umber to help warm up the finish. At this point, my paints were dry and I could get to adding some character to the pieces with a bit of ultra-fine steel wool. This will add fine scratches to the top layers of paint without removing any of the metallic, so the end finish looks like wear that's accumulated over time. These parts all got reassembled, and off camera I dressed the Stormtrooper in his new gear, but I realized I'd missed a detail. After looking back at my reference image, I noticed there were lower leg pouches. So I tracked down some small leather ammo holders and had some leftover brown elastic and Velcro from another project, but no sewing machine. So with my hot glue gun in hand, I got to gluing the Velcro to the elastic. These seams will be hidden by the pouches, so they don't need to be pretty. But much to my surprise, even with the raw edges and the glue, they're not half bad. The final update I'll be making is to solve a small problem of my own creation. The head motion of the Stormtrooper is triggered by a motion sensor in the abdominal armor. But because of the rain poncho, that's just not going to work. Thankfully, there's an option to run it in trigger mode by switching the power button to the right, and then I can install a trigger button using this 1/8" jack on the back. So I took a pre-wired mono headphone jack, a pre-wired momentary switch, and connected the two with some Wago connectors and was able to make an inconspicuous trigger hidden under the belt on the back. And with that final step out of the way, I'm calling this one done.
Look, sir, droids. How long have you had these droids? Let me see your identification.
Now sure, it may have taken me a year to start this project, but I'd say it was worth it. And now that it's wrapped up, you can head over to the smuggler's room to check out Brian's incredible build. And with any luck, the two of us will inspire you to customize a Stormtrooper of your own. That's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. But most importantly, go make something.
These aren't the droids we're looking for. Do you know what's going on? All right, men, load your weapon. There's one. Set for stun.